And we're live. Welcome back to another episode of these crazy people that just eat meat and can't stop talking about it. Today I got Jules with me, Neuro Diva Jules. Today we're going to talk about mitochondria, ATP, and some relevant issues with autism. So thanks for coming, Jules. It's always nice to see you. We always have a good time when we
Too.
do a live stream together or a video.
Yep. Yep.
So
It,
you found an article, huh?
I did. So this was titled, let's see, let's bring it back up. Evidence of mitochondrial dysfunction in autism, biochemical links, genetic based associations, and non energy related mechanisms. And I just kind of briefly saw a part of it in the beginning, and um, it was just super interesting. It was talking about how, and we've touted this. You and I, we have discussed this. We've mentioned this, that we have a problem, especially autistic people have a tendency to have we're not able to really utilize glucose for energy for the brain. Because that's the importance of being able to uh, fuel to get energy
Right.
and you know what I mean, and on top of that, like, there's other things involved, there's other dysfunctions that we have, there's other deficiencies that we have, but one of the main ones is not being able to use glucose for energy for the brain, and this article mentions that.
Yeah. So at the core of it, I think it comes down to um, not being able to utilize oxidative phosphorylation is effectively right. There's some impairment in that
Yep.
function.
Yep. Yep. And you've known this, but this is just a nice, more in depth of why they've they really do talk about that, which is kind of interesting. I think, and I quoted it to you earlier,
Hmm.
about how, yeah, it says that um, Coleman and Blass, so 1985, Coleman and Blass observed elevated levels of lactate in the plasma of 4 patients with autism, suggesting a defect in oxidative phosphorylation. However, it was not until 1998 that the concept of autism as a mitochondrial disease was first proposed. So this hypothesis was based on finding lactic acidosis, elevated urine levels of Krebs cycle metabolites, plasma carnitine deficiency, and decreased brain glucose utilization and adenosine triphosphate levels in autistic patients. So, yeah, like, I mean, if we're on just a typical American diet, our brains do not work optimally, and and I think that's
Arguably, the
why.
whole body, right?
I'm sorry.
Arguably, the whole body doesn't work as well, right?
Well, that's true. Exactly, that's true because it's the entire body. ATP affects the entire body. So, I'm sorry, that is my child.
That's all
Upset that
right.
he can't come in the bedroom right now.
Yeah,
So yeah, this
you
is
know,
people talk.
I frequently bring up Dr. Seyfried's work. And he wrote the book "Cancer is a Metabolic Disease," and he
Yes.
ultimately cites the damage to oxidative phosphorylation as the origin of most cancers. Because when that process, which depends on respiration, becomes chronically damaged, then the cells revert back to fermentation to generate energy. And the fermentation process is sort of a very rudimentary, very old process that we evolved away from. And when it's
Hmm.
activated, it not only produces less energy, but it produces more oxidative stress. So you get more free radicals or radical oxygen species in the cell, which is harder to get rid of. And then to make things worse, it also tends to activate this very old um, mechanism that allows cells to not go through apoptosis and expire and be recovered, but
Oh my
they continue to live on and proliferate. So that makes perfect sense. And then in parallel to all that we've already said, that study that came out, I don't know, a year or two ago, they noticed that if expectant mothers had high A1C values, indicating that their red blood cells have been damaged by elevated glucose or blood sugar, they were significantly more likely to give birth to an autistic child.
Yeah, that has been uh, mentioned a lot. And speaking of, just to clarify, what apoptosis is basically when a cell has been taken over by, let's just say, a germ, not germ, a bacteria or something like that that's trying to invade the body. It will kill itself, or yeah, get rid of itself. And on top of that, actually, now that you mentioned it, we're all talking all about autophagy. The thing about autistic people, we tend to actually have a problem with autophagy. There's a dysfunction in our being able to get rid of damaged or uh, dysfunctional cells. Apparently, like I read that in one of the articles too. So that was another thing I found that was really interesting. So there's probably a lot of backed up gunk in our bodies, in our brains, because it's not working functioning. And you kind of got to question, like, what's happening in our body? What is causing all of that to happen? And simply, yeah, it's definitely has to do with our bodies, but also I mean, sorry, our diet, but it's also environmental. It has to be also environmental. Our environment is definitely not as clean and or natural as it used to be. Too much
Right.
industrialization, you know what I mean?
Well, and we know that it's common to find elevated levels of things like mercury or
Right.
phytates or phytic acid or um, uh, oxalate or oxalic acid because for some reason people on the spectrum have a tendency not to be able to eliminate those things as readily as people who are not on the spectrum. So we
Right.
see impaired processes, and more they seem to be largely contributed to by the consumption of carbohydrates. And naturally, you don't get much oxalic acid that makes oxalic crystals if you don't eat plants. You just get
Yeah,
the
no, definitely.
minimum levels that your body creates for its own processes.
So, I mean, it makes me kind of go, I think actually, if I were to say what autism is, it's kind of like a diabetes type 1.5, because like you're born with it, but it's still closer to type 2 diabetes. You know what I mean? Like, because we do still produce uh, insulin.
Hmm.
Type 1 doesn't produce insulin and they're born with it, but type 2 does produce insulin, but it's just dysfunctional, and you're not born with it. It's environmental. So it's like uh, type 2 or type 1.5 diabetes. I would call it.
Yeah, it seems like there's the condition of being born with autism is at least made worse by um, high blood sugar and
Hmm.
perhaps even high high insulin levels as a result. So insulin being a master hormone, it has many influences other than just lowering blood sugar. And of
Hmm.
course, when you have high blood sugar, you tend to produce more insulin. So, well,
Yeah.
the long term effects of high levels of insulin and glucose, it's no surprise that that would have some sort of influence on a developing fetus.
Oh, most definitely. But it's kind of, my question would be, so from here, let's just say since I'm eating much more healthily, I know if my first child, Raiden, who is, more is considered moderate autistic, uh, pretty much nonverbal, who's starting to become a little bit more verbal. Um, how would, let's just say, for instance, he does improve a lot in the future. He decides to have a family, decides to have kids. How would his kids be like? Because I am strictly having him on a ketogenic diet. Um, More so ketovore diet. He doesn't really have any vegetables. He does have occasional like almonds and stuff like that, because I do make almond treats or whatever occasionally. But otherwise, his diet is really mostly meat, like chicken and bacon and pork rinds. But
Right.
yeah.
Well, I
So
think
I
I think I don't think any of us expect a diet to necessarily change the structure of a brain, but
yeah,
certainly it helps it function better, right?
better. Yeah, most definitely. I mean, because that does pose a question. Like, so for my case, I don't think I ever talked about it in our interviews and stuff like that. But like, since I was diagnosed at 20, I wonder. But I feel like it changed so much of my brain that you can never say I'm not autistic because like it's genetic, but I do not show, a lot of the autistic symptoms that comes with, like, severe anxiety, severe depression, stimming, uh, um, OCD, things like that. Like they're symptomatic of autism. Like people have different types of symptoms, but like for me, I don't really. I used to. I think mine was a pen clicking. I used to. I really had to do things like that, or like randomly singing songs. Like let's just say you say a word that it reminds me of a song. I have to sing it. I have to like say
Hmm.
the rest of the
Scripting,
phrase of the
yeah.
song. Yeah, yeah. Oh, yeah. Okay, that's what it is basically. And but I haven't done that in years. In years.
Mm.
So I don't know what in my brain structure that changed, but it was able to, because we're so neuroplastic, it physically was able to change my brain. So I wonder, even though being autistic is genetic and it's in our DNA, if our brain is able to change physically to where we need it to, for the most part function like we're supposed to, um, yeah, I mean, how much does it matter if it's DNA?
Yeah, well, I think if anything, it's that same old sort of um, scenario where you might the genes really sort of determine how things manifest. Something's
Yeah.
going to manifest. So when people eat an improper diet, some people get heart disease really early, some don't. Some get
Right.
arthritis from the inflammation. Some people get obese really quick, and some don't. So I think the manifestation itself as a result of an improper diet varies from person to person.
Mhm.
There's always an influence, and perhaps the genes and per and when we talk about genes, we can talk about the DNA and the basic sort of uniqueness of the DNA, but there's also the epigenetic response, which can be passed down from generation to generation, but it's still
Mhm.
rather flexible, right? So,
Yep. Yep.
so that probably has something to do with it as well.
That's very true. I mean, it is said to be 20% genetic, 80% um, epigenetic. So that's huge. 80% versus 20%. Like people are just using that genetic part as an excuse.
Hmm.
And it's just unfortunate, actually. Like many of them is just more like they didn't know. They don't know that you have more power than you realized. But if you keep people, um, you know, without information, they're not going to realize they have more power.
Yeah, a
So,
lot of people. Well, a lot of people are diagnosed with conditions and then told that you're going to have this for the rest of your life. You're going to have to take medication for the rest of your life. It's going to
mhm.
progressively get worse, and that's not always the case, as we know. We've seen people, you know, and you probably know Emily Penton by now. Um,
Mhm.
yeah, she had MS and she was bipolar. And
Wow.
changing her diet. She lost 100 pounds in a year, and even though you could still see some of the plaques in her MRI scans in her brain, she doesn't have any active symptoms of MS, and she
Wow.
doesn't seem to have any bipolar symptoms either. So she's able to move on with life and live a normal life and not need medication. So that's
That's
kind of one of
really
the most miraculous stories I know. Most people, it's a little more subtle. Like I know myself, before I got diagnosed in my late 30s as autistic and having anxiety disorder, of course, I had no idea. I thought everybody was like that. And of course, first thing I do is throw a bunch of drugs at you, you know, start trying all the SSRIs on you one by one,
yep.
because none of them, none of them were helpful. In fact, they were very disturbing to take for me. So I couldn't wait to not try them. So,
Yeah.
but my anxiety is declined, and that's a major thing. I mean, just learning. I didn't know what stimming was back then. I had no idea. I didn't know had any
Yeah.
idea I was autistic. So I mean, on one hand, I think the nutrition is by far the biggest tool in feeling better and functioning better, but
Hmm.
also understanding the condition and understanding what stimming is or whatever. When you don't know what it is, it's just this thing you always do, that nobody nobody wants you to do around them.
Yep.
It's more anxiety and more awkwardness. But once you understand it, you have a lot more control over it, you know.
Hmm. Yep. More knowledge, more power. I definitely agree with that. I mean, for my, it's really different. Like, I guess being the autistic child growing up and then having your own, seeing it from that perspective, like I was verbal, so I can't. Oh, sorry, just I can't hear you.
I'm
Oh, there you
listening.
go. Oh, okay, okay. There's something wrong with the. I couldn't hear what you were saying. Okay, yeah. So
Yeah, no, the video my video is lagging sometimes,
Oh, okay, okay, gotcha.
but it
Um,
doesn't affect the audio. So
okay, cool. But so having it, it was really hard for me. I think because since I'm sensitive, especially if your child's gonna scream or really like be emotional and cry out, I have a hard time handling it even as an adult now. But definitely changing my diet, it really helps me not freak out as much. I have to like even tell my husband, I have to be like, hey, could you please kind of like tone it down because like he does he, if you scream, it's gonna just get worse. And so I just feel like I, I think a neurotypical parent can handle it so much better than a person who has sensory processing issues. But I feel like I've done a lot more for me to be able to be a lot more calm and more aware of it.
mhm.
So, but I feel like because I'm autistic, I feel like I understand my child better too. I think that's an advantage, way bigger advantage than a neurotypical parent. Like I just recently spoke to another autistic parent and she was telling me how she is typically nonverbal most of the time, so she doesn't really talk a lot, especially in the morning. She says she's very quiet and she
Mhm.
doesn't, and what was really striking was when she said that she doesn't think in words. And that was a real like, whoa, what? And my child is not nonverbal. And I go, okay, wait, that's true. Like I think about it, I'm like, wow, I don't really think in words a lot. I think in visuals. Most
Pictures.
if I could, yeah, just mostly if I could just flash you a picture,
Mhm.
that's way more efficient than words. Words are
Mhm.
secondary to visual. And why that's important is because people think that hey, you see it, you should be able to speak it. That's not the case for us. We're able to go, if you show us a picture and are able to like somehow visually show us or explain to us, we would probably be able to communicate so much more efficiently in that way than in just words. So I
Yeah,
just found that really profound.
Temple Grandin wrote a whole book about that. I don't know if you've read it.
Oh really?
It's called Thinking in Pictures, I believe.
Derp. I should have just I could have saved everyone the trouble and be like, yeah, that's terrible granted.
Well,
Yeah,
I used to have days too where I didn't like, I wasn't say I didn't want to talk, like speaking was less I was less inclined to speak. Like you
Yeah.
kind of feel like that part of your brain just it isn't engaged, you know.
Hmm. Yep. That's the perfect
So,
word.
but
Engaged.
I'm also known as a prolific talker. So people sometimes go, "What you jabber all the time?" I don't know. What are you talking about? Well, it's the off days because then everybody thinks you're in a bad mood just because you're not talking, and you're really not in a bad mood. You're just inside your head in your visual world, you know.
Yeah. I mean, I'm a talker though. I think because like I also was diagnosed with ADHD, and like they say that people with ADHD have are not all, but especially girls are talkers. We're talkers, but like I talk in spurts. I don't
Mm.
talk. Other times I'm perfectly happy being quiet. But the other times, if you get me going, I will like nonstop talk about a subject that's like really I'm passionate about.
Um, yeah, and I talked about learning, finding out I was autistic in my late 30s, and then learning about all these different things like stimming and the
Mhm.
visual thinking and stuff like that. Now I realize it's why I kept moving in the direction I did career wise, because most of my work is very visual. Um, so I spent a lot of time drawing designs and stuff, and then getting most of the information from looking at photographs and sketches and stuff like that, and it works really well for me. Well, but counter to um, being dyslexic and being a really slow reader and everything, where characters, letters and numbers are a real problem for me.
Mhm.
But that actually did get better um, somewhere while I was on carnivore. Like trying to remember, I've said this a million times, but trying to remember a phone number in order. Once it starts
Yeah,
getting out of
no,
order,
you're telling us
it's
about
hard to
that.
remember
Yeah,
the whole thing. Yeah.
yeah, you're telling us about that. That's really. I think that's really cool. I failed. Actually, that was one of the things on the intelligence test that I had to take to assess whether or not I'm like autistic still, or if what kind of anxiety that I had. I forgot what kind of test it was, but it's a IQ test that they this is better than the IQ test that those schools do. This is apparently like the mostly accepted, widely accepted IQ assessment, and like I scored so horribly in memorization. Like I do not memorize things well because I'm a visual creature. So like if you just show me a bunch of numbers, like and you just tell me to memorize it that way, I won't be able to. I just don't. If you show me pictures, though, I'm much better at memorizing pictures than I am anything else. So yeah, I scored really high, really strange, like 93rd percentile in um, reasoning and uh, comprehension, but mathematics and like some poor. I was so I'm Asian. I should not be poor in math, but
You're
I
killing the
am.
stereotype.
I know. I like it though. It's okay. I accept it. I like Stephen He. I don't know if you know who Stephen He is, but he's the
No.
guy's like emotional damage. That guy. I'm okay with it. That's why. Just go with it. you know.
So let's take a step back. I have this memory of reading about nutrition as an adult, and somebody saying, "Look," in the book saying, "Look, there's really only three things we derive energy from, right?"
Yeah.
And for the sake of argument, we'll leave alcohol out of the equation because most people don't depend on alcohol for their daily energy. And if you do, you probably have bigger problems. So, anyways, it's carbohydrates, fat, and protein, and your body will preferentially use them in that order to generate energy, right? So,
Right.
typically, from our perspective, you burn carbohydrates first because they raise your blood sugar, and having elevated blood sugar is not a good thing, right?
Yeah.
And then fat second. But I think you and I both agree you don't have to eat any carbohydrate whatsoever, and you will have nice level, steady blood sugar the whole time because your body will
Mhm.
synthesize all the blood sugar it needs for those cells, like the red blood cells that require it, right? They don't have a
Mhm. Mhm.
nucleus. They don't use fatty acids or ketone bodies for fuel. They use glucose, but your body's perfectly able to synthesize all the glucose it needs without
Mhm.
having to have you eat any exogenous sources, right?
Mhm. Mhm.
So I just like to make that clear, just because I'm continually confounded with people when I have conversations. They don't seem to understand what the constituents of the food is that we actually derive energy from. So,
Yeah. I mean, they still
uh,
tout that it's carbohydrates are essential. Like, no,
mhm.
they're not. No. Who said that? Where are you getting that? Like, yeah, it's some article. You send me that one. And let me tell you how old it is. I mean, apparently, I think I recall someone showing an article that says that carbohydrates are essential was like from back from the 90s or something like that, or I can't remember when it was, but it was it, there was no basis, there was no actual like basis behind it, and because it was stuck there, now everyone thinks it's essential. But I think I forgot what the reasoning of how they were able to get that published is was the question. Like how?
Well, and I address this with people all the time because everybody's like, "Oh, send me your peer-reviewed published studies," But as we
Yeah.
know, there's been all kinds of stuff that was published that was complete garbage, and sometimes people write complete garbage and get it published just to prove the point that just about anything can get through, right? And
Yep.
then, when you talk to people who do studies and want to get them published, a lot of times they just shop them around until somebody agrees to publish them. A lot of times
That's
that's because it's somebody they know, or it's just somebody they know that's aligned with their conclusion on the study,
yep.
right? So this whole concept of peer reviewed, published studies being the holy grail is, kind of not quite as
Yeah.
substantial as we're led to believe. So,
True. So I mean, like that's hard too because someone can turn that around and go, well, the same goes for carnivore. That same goes for all the studies on ketogenic diets or carnivore diets. You know what I mean? And
mhm.
I mean, you just and then if that's the case, you gotta go. Okay, then you gotta use your common sense. Then I mean, if you look
True.
at if you look at our history, yeah, sure, 12,000 years ago we were eating carbs, but if you look at the studies also, significant health issues arise back then. And if you look at and before then, we're all in the ice age. So what were we eating? You gotta ask. What were you common sense? There was no plants. Were we gonna compete with other herbivores? Really? I don't think so. I think we were
Yeah,
being
well,
made.
99% of all natural plants are toxic to human beings, overtly
Yeah,
toxic. And many of the
I
ones we eat
hate those.
today are only subtly toxic, right?
Right. And you know what's funny is that people were telling, still bring up, but bananas are like, how come we can eat bananas? Like, bananas were not really bananas that we know today, nor
Right.
strawberries, nor berries that we know. Like, eh, they were not there. They were not edible back then. Strawberries were not edible. Bananas were not edible. Like, we made it that way. We
Mhm.
genetically modified them. So, and made them sweeter and sweeter as the years went on. So, like, we just forgot. I think a lot of it is just we don't know what it was like before. I mean, it's really just hard. And then and honestly, it is hard to prove. Other than we found things, here and there, but a lot of it has been destroyed. A lot of the actual, probably real proof that we could just say, for 100%, in fact, we were this or we were that. But by generally of all the evidence that has been brought, you can kind of at least see the picture of, yeah, we mostly ate carnivore, like in a
Animals.
carnivore way. Yeah,
Yeah. Well,
minimally,
I,
minimally.
I Yeah, I make the argument this way. Number one, we have all the trash piles on latrines from all the habituation sites, so we
Yeah.
know what people were eating, right? And then on top
Hmm.
of that, the Max Planck Institute does the stable isotope assays on the remains, both the bones, the teeth, and even fossilized bones. There's still collagen present for tw- 10, 20, 30, maybe 40,000 years. And when you can extract the collagen from those fossils, you can then do a stable isotope analysis. And we know for a fact that
Right.
most of these ancient cultures were, in fact, just eating animals. Occasionally, you find one that ate some plants, but their plant consumption made up 20% or less of their diet. And like you said, what were they going to eat?
Yeah, right. I mean,
Mhm.
it's cold. I mean, what can you find? I mean, I'm sure. Like, okay, so there's the other argument of like there's people in Japan, like Okinawans. Why is it that they can eat sweet potatoes? Why can they and still live until they're 100? Why can they drink green tea? Why can they? Well, I think that if you're metabolically healthy, if and for the most part, it even says the CDC is like 6.8% of us, only 6.8% of us in the United States are metabolically healthy. If, okay, so if those 6 point, sorry, in going back to Okinawa, if they're metabolically healthy, they were mostly brought up on non-processed foods, hardly any processed foods. I think if your liver is functioning and the rest of your body organs are all functioning very well, I don't think a little bit of toxins is too bad. Not a lot is, but in America, you have over consumed these things, processed things. You're basically eating plastic in a sense, so much so that your body is unable to get rid of any toxins anymore. You just can't. You're gonna accumulate all these. So you cannot compare yourself and decide I'm gonna try to go on a clean diet when you're already effed up. Sorry, you're gonna have problems if you start eating like that.
Yeah, and
Maybe I'm
then
saying,
I think the Okinawan diet has traditionally been a lot of fish and a lot of pork.
yeah, they were, and I
Mhm.
can tell you that for a fact. And they've only become more, you know, uh, plant based is only because they became famous. I'm sorry, but like they're not really plant based. They became more plant based since being taken over by the government. Sorry, having our United U.S. armies come in, and then I guess the whole idea of them becoming popularized for becoming plant based. I think they picked it up from there. I think they really were like, oh yeah, oh, we're known for that. Oh, maybe we should incorporate that. Maybe I'm kicking myself in the foot for this, but like that's what I believe. I believe that they were not really plant-based diet. I think they were more so fish and animal based. But because of the culture, and they became so popular because of this whole blue zone movement, and the guy saying that Dan Buettner saying that they're plant based, I think they picked up and they wanted to keep that image, that the healthy image, but they're because a lot of them are using more canola oil or vegetable oils now than they used to. They used to only use lard.
Yeah, and as I recall, the story goes that during World War II, their pig population was dwindling, and
Yep.
they had to eat more plant-based foods. And of course, there's a war going on, and
Yep.
then prior to that, they ate a lot of pork and a lot of seafood. So, and not so
Yeah.
much. And I mean, think about it. If you're eating a lot of pork and seafood, and you had some sweet potatoes with it, that's a lot different than eating bread and French fries and drinking Coke, and
Oh yeah.
eating
Yeah.
candy.
Right.
A huge difference, right?
Huge difference. There probably won't be any more centenarians after a certain point. I
I
really
think the
believe.
mistake is thinking that the sweet potatoes and, let's say, the green tea are are the are the things that are helping them live so long, because it's probably the
Yep.
exact opposite, right?
maybe, you know what, I cannot say, I don't, my knowledge is not enough to go 100% yes, but I feel like I feel some of that is true. I do, like, just based on evidence of, is it really the green tea? Maybe it's just actually the green tea makes, because the body is already pretty healthy, it's okay that they have green tea. And so
Well,
they'll find this.
I dug it up. There's a bunch of studies that were done on green tea and particularly see what this does for weight loss because it's sold as a weight loss supplement. Green
Yeah.
tea extracts, and quite clearly, what green tea does is it binds with nutrients, so they're not absorbed. So you're essentially less is getting into your system, and this has been
Okay.
studied over and over again. And same thing with some of the other plant-based, weight loss products is, the anti-nutrients in there are very effective at binding with nutrients, and you're essentially um, sort of starving yourself of nutrients. So, but
Wait,
if you
so,
already have plenty of nutrients, a cup of tea is probably not a problem.
but like, that's really interesting though, because, well, they're saying that there's all that, there's a thing in green tea that makes you, I guess they talk about the antioxidants. That's what's it's really known for, is the antioxidants. And
So
it's
we should
like,
talk about that.
okay, I like that. Let's bring that topic up.
Because I love all these commercials I hear. I just heard one for a certain type of fruit juice. I'm sure everybody will figure out what I'm talking about eventually, but they say it's packed with power and it's loaded with antioxidants and so on and so forth. And it's not necessarily untrue that there are antioxidants in this fruit juice or green tea, but the question is, can those antioxidants actually get into the cell and actually be effective at reducing oxidative stress? And
Yeah.
the studies show that they are not. They do not get into the cell. And in fact, in the case of the
What?
fruit juices, the fruit juices tend to come with so much sugar that they actually increase oxidative stress. It
Oh
doesn't
my
matter how
God.
many antioxidants are in the juice, they're not getting into the cell where they can lower the oxidative load created by the sugar in the drink itself, and including
Wait, my
fructose.
mind is blown. Whoa. Okay, wait. This is the first time I'm hearing about this. I want to look this up. Oh my gosh.
It's just like resveratrol is supposed to be this miracle. It comes from grapes, and they're like, oh, it's shown to do this and do that, and then when they actually
Yeah.
do the studies, they're like, wow, it doesn't get in the cell. We don't absorb it well. You'd have to take a mega dose of it. Never mind drinking wine to get it, because you can never drink that much wine. It
Yeah.
doesn't work, and it's still sold as a supplement, but it's ineffective. Same thing with curcumin from
Yeah.
turmeric. Yeah, it doesn't, we don't absorb it. It doesn't make it to the cell. It's everything from not being absorbed to not once it's absorbed, not getting into the cell where it can do any good. Because curcumin is supposed to be a really powerful anti-inflammatory, but then they just do the actual studies and like, wow, this isn't working very well. So then they start packing it with things like pepperine to get us to absorb it more, and then a lot of people react to the pepperine, which is,
Oh, no
the active
wonder.
ingredient of black pepper. Yeah, so a little by little these things fail. I think primarily people give it a try. Maybe it helps a little bit, or maybe
I'm
there's a
one of them.
placebo
I'm
effect.
not gonna lie. I'm one of them. I was like, why does it taste like pepper? Like, ew.
Mm, yeah.
That makes sense. They mixed it to help absorb it better. Like, if it was so good for you, why can't your body just use it? And that's another topic, because I had posted a video recently about how, why is it that, autistic people, we can be on a carnivore diet and a ketogenic diet, but still be nutrient deficient in some things. And it turns out, it's like, I did a lot of research, and even based on the clients that I have, even speaking for myself, it I really believe it's because they have problems digestively to be able to extract and utilize these nutrients. Um, whether it be low stomach acid, whether it be just a lot of different factors. I think just not able to break down food properly, enzymatic issues, things like that. So we do need a little bit support, and that's why I tend to tell people, hey, up your HCl, like use HCl supplementation, because maybe since for a long time you've been on a poor diet, that your acidity level in your stomach is much higher than it should be, and therefore you cannot break down your foods properly. Because using eating a high meat, a protein diet, fat diet, you need to have a high acidity to break these down properly and then absorb in the smaller intestine, et cetera, et cetera. Um, so I think, because I even spoke to a client in who I've met in one of the groups, and she had shown a picture of her son who had a huge bloated belly, and he's been on a carnivore diet, which was really strange, and I told her he has digestive, that's more of he has bloating. There is a he must have some sort of like maybe IBS or some sort of digestive problem. So he needs more support. His bile probably is not working properly. All these things, and he was not able to poop at all, even being on a carnivore diet. So I
Mm.
think a lot of autistic people, not even just autistic people, but there are people who cannot, even regardless being on the perfect ancestral diet, have problems digesting because they've either been on a poor diet when they were growing up, or they were born that way, unfortunately, and they need a little bit more support, which is why I say, hey, take HCL. And I think I spoke with her about a week later, because her son wasn't pooping for like 2 weeks, and she was like, I need to
Wow.
take him to the hospital, or because even the laxatives weren't working, nothing was working. And I said,
Wow.
just take some. Yeah, and I just told her, take more bile, because bile lubricates the mucosal line, and,
Canal.
and in this case I was like, even try add some MCT oil. So I'm not saying take it regularly, I'm saying using it as more of a medicinally,
Yeah.
to see how it works. And then when your body is able to finally, because you're on a clean diet, really start to clear up the system, really start to up the system where it can extract nutrients properly, then remove those. You don't need it as much. You know what I mean? So, and ever since then, she was like, "Oh my gosh, thank you so much," because she was able to. Her son pooped regularly after that.
Mm.
Uh, so yeah, I mean, I don't know how she
I
is now.
think
Maybe I'll follow her in the future.
between being on the wrong diet and then, of course, all the antibiotics and stuff we might take, especially when we're young or
Yeah.
getting sick for the first time, there's probably quite a bit of dysregulation in the gut biome, and it's very different from your mouth to your small intestine to your large intestine. And of course, we know a lot of people eat a high carbohydrate diet. The organisms that are supposed to be abundant in the large intestine have a tendency to work their way up into the small intestine, causing all kinds of problems. So it's no surprise, and of course, children aren't always seeded with all of the microbiome that they're supposed to have, whether it's because they didn't have a natural birth, or the mother wasn't healthy, or they gave them baby formula. There's all kinds of issues that cause, particularly with male infants, if you give them soy based formula. And it's kind of surprising me that people have no idea. you know I was with
Hmm.
some folks, and they had a little kid, and they were like, "Oh yeah, we just give her formula. It's got everything in it needs, and blah 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 blah." The
That's
doctor
the
just said,
same.
"Don't give her, don't give her any honey, and because that could be a problem." And then I look over, and the kid's got somebody's shoe in their mouth, and I'm like, "What?" I don't know if honey is going to be the problem here, because that kid is literally licking the bottom of somebody's shoe right now. So
Kids will put anything in their mouth. What's the irony of this is that, like, my kids are such picky eaters, but like that you will find like anything and everything else in their mouth. They're just like, what? Why won't you eat a steak? I don't understand. Why do you have why do you have a book in your mouth? Like, why do you have that hole in your mouth? Like licking the side rails, and you're just like, oh. They won't put anything else but they won't put steak in their mouth, but they'll put those things. Like, why? It's so funny, kids.
That's what kids
But
do.
I was one of them though. I was unable to breastfeed because, well, those of us who didn't produce milk, like I only found out later that it's because of insulin issues.
Mm,
I found out more and more that's more common now that we cannot, not that I didn't want to. I wanted to do the whole attachment parenting, but I wasn't able to breastfeed like really. I it never came up, and they never told me what I should do about that. It
mm.
was really, I didn't have a lot of support, so it was really sad. So I wish I could have, but I had to supplement them. But I did ended up buying none of the American brand. I didn't buy any American formula. Ended up buying um, ones from Germany, and apparently they have one of the best. Like Holly, there's Holly and like some Liebenstein, Lieben, whatever, Liebeswort. Anyway, I'm naming this name, but they use like pasture raised animals because they're so strict on the way they bring up their cows and their goats. So that's why I went with their formula instead of American. Even the American organic ones, I would not touch.
Yeah, I was suckled on goat milk.
Oh, goat
My
milk.
mom,
Oh, good for you.
my mom was O positive, and my sister and I were born A negative, or no, the other way around. She was A negative, and we were A positive, and we had reactions to everything from her. So
Oh my.
yeah,
Is
so
I don't know, is it blood type that does determine like whether you're more susceptible to those things? Like
yeah, certain combinations apparently are um,
what?
problematic even after you're born. So yeah, we were both born with in distress from being the my mother's immune system attacking us essentially in the womb, and then
Oh
there were
no.
yeah, so I guess that happens sometimes. So
Yeah.
um, and then they're like, yeah, you probably shouldn't breastfeed them because it can continue the problem. And of course, this is 50 years ago, so maybe the opinions have changed. But so, anyways, that's the story I was told on why I was fed goat's milk instead of mom's milk.
Oh, that's interesting. Well, yeah. I
Good luck finding goat's
it
milk right now, though, huh?
I know. I don't know. Like I just try to, I'm not, now I'm falling into like what is like more beneficial for our kids. How do I help them supplement? I mean, how do I help them since they didn't get really colostrum from me and or breast milk from me? How can I help them repair their gut? Because of I wasn't able to do that. I wasn't able to provide them much uh, of a healthy gut. I feel like so my both my kids have digestive problems, and um, but so I mean so that's why I noticed my second child has dairy. I don't know allergies, but dairy sensitivities. I would say he gets acid reflux from it. He will not be able to sleep well at night. He gets irritable, things like that. You can tell he does not do well on dairy, and that tells you that he very likely has leaky gut, some gut problem. And if colostrum helps, and the studies have been showing that colostrum can help with that, I want to try it at least. Um, yeah, so
Sure.
I supplement my children on colostrum, and also I have done. Right now, I'm trying a little bit of carnitine, L-carnitine, and acetylcarnitine.
Hmm.
Um, yeah, I haven't tried carnosine yet. I just did a video on that one because I'm still, because of the studies haven't been pretty consistent. It's been on mice that has been very like interesting, but human wise it's been working on some but not a lot, not others, so like it has been inconsistent, but I think it's a worth a try for those who are interested in seeing improvements in socialization, because it says that carnosine does help with that, with oxytocin, helps
Hmm.
not necessarily producing oxytocin, but apparently like showing oxytocin levels upping in like the I think this spinal fluid or something. I'm sorry, I forgot what I'm the word I'm looking for. But yeah. So
Mhm.
I mean, it can work for some autistic people, but not necessarily all. But I definitely think carnitine actually can help most autistic people.
Well, and supplementing
So
amino acids is really pretty safe. I don't know too many people
yeah,
that have bad reactions to them. So
yeah, yeah, yeah. But I'm looking forward to the change. And actually, no, you know what? There must be because all of a sudden, my son is starting to talk in his sleep.
mm,
He never did that before, and I'm not sure if that's like a any indication of anything. But to me, if your child is talking, there are words. He is not, like I was saying, telling you, he's mostly nonverbal.
mhm.
But if he's talking in his sleep, and then now while he's awake, he's starting to sing songs. He's starting to sing karaoke.
Really, he doing
Yeah.
Elvis or what?
He loves Christmas songs. So he's
Ah,
like playing, he presses the piano, his electric piano will play like a karaoke version of something. So he'll sing like
mm,
karaoke songs and it's really cute. Um, so he's just been more verbal. So there's got to be some truth to it. Like, so I want to try it. Like you said, there's no really bad side effects. It's very minimal. Maybe
mhm,
if anything, I think I read there was like a digestive problems, but or nausea. He hasn't had that. So for me, it's worth it. I'm not doing
mhm.
medication. I'm not gonna do something that can like over supplementing with non natural heme iron or something like that that's more dangerous than anything to me. So heme iron, since heme, if you get heme iron from your food, fine, but not from supplementation, exogenous ones. That to me is dangerous. But I think carnitine is, like you said, is pretty safe. Why not? Cholesterol, pretty safe.
Yeah, yeah. I don't know anybody's. I never hear about people having reactions to those things, and when you look at the warnings on them and stuff, you a
Yeah.
lot. And you know what? Supplementation comes up all the time, and
Yep.
I'm always like, well, don't supplement with something if you don't have some compelling reason to think you need it, because I see people taking
Right.
all kinds of supplements and a lot of them are garbage. I was
Yep.
who was I telling the story to recently? Maybe it was Janice. Anyways, talking to a guy uh, who this is a long time ago. A guy was telling me he uh, worked for a company that supplied porta potties to events.
Oh, okay.
And he was telling me that like at the marathons, when they go to vacuum out the tanks and the porta potties, they're full of pills. Yeah.
What?
So people are passing partially digested tablets all the time, sometimes even capsules. Yeah, and he's like, when you go to the events like this, where these people are, performance oriented, health conscious and stuff, they're these supplements that they're taking aren't digesting, much less being absorbed.
Waste of money.
And then the there's both whether the tablet or whatever will actually dissolve in your digestive tract, and then whether it can actually be absorbed, right? So,
Right.
and I'm reluctant, to suggest people supplement stuff, but at the same time, I love a good experiment. I'll experiment on myself all
Yeah.
day long. And I
Yeah.
like other people do it, you know. So, but I think people get this mindset, oh, I gotta take my vitamins. And it's like, well, are you have a reason to think you're deficient in something? And why, and then you find out a lot of people are taking a lot of stuff. They're
Yep.
taking a multivitamin, they're taking extra this, and they're taking extra that, because somebody said it was good for them,
Oh
and
yeah.
they're
I
like,
don't take multivitamins. I don't take
yeah,
anything other than vitamin D, uh, L-theanine, and tryptophan. I don't get me wrong, I'm like ketovore, so I have it a lot, but I think my brain just needs a little bit more support. Again, like if our bodies are not able to absorb certain things or not be able to produce certain things, it just needs a little bit of support. I don't take a lot, just enough. I feel like just a little bit is just fine. But it's those who, like you said, if they're taking like freaking so many different pills, multivitamins on top of blah, 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 you really need to go look at your diet. You need to really reassess what you're eating if you're taking that much. You shouldn't have to. You really shouldn't have to. But I do say that autistic people tend to be lower on B vitamins, be lower on certain things, um, uh, in to
Methylation
meet.
issues.
Yeah, methylation. Yeah, exactly, exactly.
Yeah,
So whether you need to up your acidity in your stomach, whether you need to take more enzymes, something of those such, we just need a little bit more support somewhere along the lines. You choose. So that's why my channel does have a lot of, oh, I say, oh, you can use this, you can use that, but I'm not saying to take all of them. I'm just saying here's information. If you want to see if it works for you, great, up to you. But I'm just saying, based on the science, this is what can possibly help your situation, because um, not everybody can not everyone's body is the same. Not everyone can extract what they can from, even on the cleanest diet.
for sure.
And my channel is not necessarily just for carnivore, just for keto people, just for, it's just information.
And that's probably one of the key points right there is meat is about, optimally is about 98% bioavailable, you know,
Yeah.
and many plant-based nutrients are substantially less, and so beta carotene is the great example of, they tell us to eat carrots is good for our eyes, we can get the vitamin A from it, blah 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 blah. And then come to find out beta carotene isn't the same thing as retinol, which is actual vitamin A, right?
Mhm.
And beta carotene is actually a molecule of two retinol molecules that are joined. Only half the population in the world can derive any retinol from the beta carotene. And of that 50% of the population that can, it's somewhere between 50% and 1%. So,
Mm.
and then
Yeah.
the carrot comes packaged with all kinds of anti-nutrients. So, it's a sales pitch of like, eat carrots are rich in vitamin A, they're full of fiber. And then of course, I'm even carnivore for a long time. In fact, I talked to a doctor the other day, and so he's like, "Oh yeah, you're still doing the meat thing?" I'm like, yeah. He's like, "No vegetables?" I'm like, "No vegetables, no fruits." So he's like, "No fiber whatsoever?" And I'm like, "No fiber whatsoever." He's like, "And no constipation?" And I'm like, "No constipation." So, that's the thing. Everybody, including your doctor, believes you got to have some fiber, right?
Yeah. It's old news, guys. It's old news. Like
They
I guess because,
sell. Go ahead.
oh, sorry. I guess because I surround myself with people who are knowledgeable, more with update information. Like I kind of go, that's old news. What are you talking about? You don't know what you're talking about anymore. That's like from 70 years ago.
Yeah, I was
Oh,
just
that's
going to point out like spinach. They talk about spinach because it's higher in iron, but most of that iron in the spinach is not bioavailable to human beings.
yeah.
So why are you eating it? It
It doesn't
tastes
make sense,
terrible.
does it? It tastes terrible. First of all, yeah. I don't
It's
even
like
like carrots,
kale.
but yeah. Well,
I
that's
mean,
funny. I think. Yeah.
at
Go ahead.
least a
Sorry.
carrot could potentially taste good. Sometimes it tastes all right,
Not
but
me.
sometimes
Maybe
it
in a
tastes like
carrot
soap,
cake or everything.
right? If you make a cake
Yep.
out of it, yeah.
Yeah. Exactly. That's the only time I'm good with it. Zucchini cake. But I think I did a study, and like it's I think one of the studies I read was like you only are actually absorbing 19% of if you of nutrients from vegetables and fruits, but 48% from meats and animal based products and animal based foods. That kind of makes you go, you're wasting your time. You're literally wasting your time eating vegetables and fruits. Then it wouldn't doesn't make any sense, right?
Right. I'll say hello to Sly real quick. She commented a little while ago. Now
Oh, good.
Raymond
Hi.
comment. Raymond Neff is
Oh, let me.
here.
Hi, guys. Oh my gosh.
Raymond says the only fiber he gets is from a toothpick. I
That's a
think
lot. I'm
Raymond's
just
starting a
kidding.
second life as a stand-up comedian. So there you go. I'm just
I
starting
want to.
rumors.
I watch.
Yeah, me too.
Guys, when did you guys show up? I'm sorry. I wish I saw the comments sooner. Hey, ask questions, guys. Like I want to hear you guys. I want to. Let's have a discussion here.
Yeah. I don't know if you saw that movie. I think it was called The Martian. Was it Mark Wahlberg stranded on Mars, and his only hope of having food long enough to get off the planet was to cultivate some potatoes. And
Oh,
I
what?
remember when it's a science fiction movie about being stranded on Mars. And I
Oh,
remember like I was reading about little ads about the movie, and then I came across this article, and people were discussing how potatoes were actually probably the perfect food. And I
oh,
remember
Matt Damon.
going, "What? How is a potato?" Oh, it's Matt Damon. What did I say? Mark Wahlberg? Yeah, you're right, Matt Damon. That's why I always hope people like Raymond show up so he can correct me. So, anyways, yeah, I remember reading these articles, and it's like all these lofty people discussing about, hey, potatoes might be the perfect food, and then when you look at it, it's not. I mean, how could you take a piece of steak and compare it to a potato, right? I
Yeah,
mean, nutrition wise, it's completely devoid. It's got starch and a few vitamins,
yeah,
and
it's
again,
crazy, right?
how many of those vitamins can we actually extract from potatoes,
Have you ever watched Alone? Hey guys, tell me in the comment. Have you guys ever watched the show Alone? Like, it's such an awesome show. It People who are just going out to places like Alaska by themselves, trying to survive off the land, and especially when winter hits, they're trying to make their shelters. They're trying to, and guess what they prize the most is fat and meats. Like they are doing whatever they can to try to get fish and whatever animals that they can get. Um, and they know, because they know these living off of the plants, it can help them out just enough, but it will not keep them through. They're all starving, nutrient deficient. They could not make it, a lot of them, and the ones that could make it got like the biggest game with like fat and meats. Those are the people that won. So watch that show Alone, guys.
Yeah, I'll have to check it out. Um, so I want to circle back to just some basic concepts in nutrition to kind of help people understand, because we talk about things like ATP.
Yep.
And I know when I first was reading about the concept of mitochondrial function being
Yes.
at the heart of um, most physical elements and most mental elements, I thought, oh man, this sounds like a real stretch. But of course, the more I read, the more it made sense, right? So,
Hmm.
I kind of mentioned that we really only derive energy from carbohydrates, fats, and proteins. And protein is usually the last thing we derive energy from because it's mostly reserved for building building tissues in the body or fluids in the body as well. So I wanted to get into a little bit of the difference between burning fat and carbohydrates in the cell as far as energy production. So energy is sort of produced by the mitochondria in the form of ATP. So ATP is the final discrete unit of energy in the cellular level. And I know I posted it, I'm sure, in Meat Mosaic Facebook and probably Autistic Carnivore, but there's a study that showed that the human heart actually runs best on animal fat.
Hmm.
So we run better on fat, as we've shown, but even more so in many cases directly on animal fat, as opposed to plant fats. So what's going on in the cells when we take in the carbohydrate or the fat, let's say fat, it usually comes in the form of fatty acid chains, ketone bodies, stuff like that. Um, there, there's a conversion ratio of the units of either fat or carbohydrate that you put in the cell and how much ATP it can generate. And then the flip side of that is how much waste product is generated, because it's the waste product, which is usually shows up in the form of, oxidative stress, right? You have um, reactive oxygen species, which are produced by metabolism. You get less of that when you metabolize fat than you do when you metabolize carbohydrates. So there's a lot that could be read about mitochondria and all the functions they perform. They used to, when we were, I don't know about you, but when I was a kid, I mean, we kind of were introduced to mitochondria as like, oh yeah, this is the thing in the cell that produces the energy,
Mhm.
and you kind of learn about ATP or uh, adenosine triphosphate, right? And
Yep.
but it turns out that the mitochondria do a lot more than that. They they serve a lot of roles, including signaling each other, signaling the nucleus, um, and some of the housekeeping, right? Like dealing with the um, the reactive oxygen species, which is what causes the oxidative stress that these antioxidants in plants actually don't help with because they don't get into the cell. So just try and circle the wagon there and bring it all together.
I know. Sorry, we were going on tangents and everything like that.
Yeah, no,
But yeah.
which is great. I think we talk about all kinds of good stuff. I was just I try not to talk too long about something like that that's super techy, and I like breaking it up. So it's good to have the other discussions in between.
Oh
I don't
yeah.
want to
Oh,
put anybody to sleep, talking about ATPs.
but I mean, I liked how you were talking about. Um, I were talking about earlier too about when I was talking about autophagy. How what's that word? When something attacks a cell and the cell just kill itself off. What was it called again? That word.
Apoptosis.
Apoptosis. Yes. Like if you say apoptosis, most people will be like, what is that? So
What?
that's why I tried to say I break it down like a cell. That way, if it gets attacked or something like that and take it over, it will destroy itself to save the colony, basically, kind of like that.
And that's triggered
So
by mitochondria.
yeah, yeah. So
Mhm.
it all works in like a great little ecosystem.
Mitochondrial
Nothing.
function actually determines whether when the mitochondria get to a certain point where they're not functioning effectively, they trigger apoptosis. So
It's so interesting. Like self
mhm.
suicide. They do it for the betterment of the whole body. But the unfortunate part is autistic people tend to what the studies that have been that I've read was that we do have a problem with autophagy, getting rid of those that are supposed to be dysfunctional or damaged cells, and that's why we have too much backed up um, of oxidative stress in our bodies, and that's why we are. It's like a vicious cycle almost, you know.
And that may have to do with, because when you have a human being and you feed it the wrong diet, the
Hmm.
mitochondria have to adapt to an alternate fuel source and perhaps higher
Yeah.
levels of oxidative stress and who knows what. And as those mitochondria reproduce, as they must, new cells have to be populated with mitochondria. Um, you have a bunch of mitochondria that have adapted to what's less than optimal, right? And that's
Hmm.
probably one of the things that, we could always run the risk of people losing their minds if you got anywhere close to talking about curing autism or anything like that. But it's not really what we're talking about. We're talking about an optimal diet for people, um, and alleviating a lot of the symptoms, or at least lessening a lot of the symptoms associated with autism, just because their body, their cells are running better, their mind, their brain is running better. And part of that is, eventually you're going to repopulate with mitochondria that are now running on the proper fuel, right?
Hmm. Yep. Yep. And I think us autistic people actually have an advantage because if you can imagine, like I was telling you again, we're probably the next 2.0 because like if we are smart or really great, we have talents in one area, and on top of that, being able to improve a lot of our de- deficits, we be like the most awesome people ever.
Well,
We be
certainly
better
we got a
than,
lot of potential for specializing, right?
yeah. I
Right.
think definitely. I mean, if I can imagine, like more, I would just joke around and say like more of us will be like Elon Musk's, where we're gonna be like super smart and become billionaires and stuff like that, because we're that smart. I mean,
Yeah. Well, I.
it's just studies. Like 1 out of 10 autistic people are uh, tend to have some sort of talent
Mhm,
than the normal population. So
mhm.
you know,
Yeah,
so I
there does definitely seem to be a trend in people on the spectrum having, a talent, right? A unique talent for something, right? And of course,
hmm
that's where we got the term idiot savant, which is no longer PC for some reason. I don't know why, but
but
yeah, and I mean, I kind of what I do is kind of specialty sort of thing, and I kind of just, I think I've told this before too, but I was diagnosed with learning disabilities a long, long time ago, and my sister was actually going to school to be a special ed teacher, and she was telling one of her, I don't know, supervisors, teachers, or whatever, and she's like, oh yeah, you should talk to my brother. And so this lady talked to me, and she's like, at some point you gotta really stop focusing on trying to learn to read as well as everybody else and do things like everybody else. And you just need to focus on your strengths because you got the strengths,
mm-hmm.
and because of course your feedback when you're a kid is all about, oh, did you learn your ABCs? Did you read
Yeah.
Dick and Jane Go to the Water Park or whatever it was? And all that stuff. Did you learn your colors? Whatever it is, that's people are very, very focused on these sort of milestones of education and so on and so forth. And when you got somebody who's just not going to do well, if you don't nudge them in the direction of their strengths, then they're kind of doomed, you know.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. It's hard. I mean,
Hmm.
we're I a lot of us, especially growing up, I felt like I was less than because I wasn't able to socialize like everybody else. I didn't have a lot
Hmm.
of friends. I was always like left out of groups, embarrassingly, ostracized. And that's something that I pushed myself to focus on a lot, as an adult, so that I do have friends. So I do, even to, I'm not even gonna lie, even to this day, like I have that ingrained in me. Like I have to have my kids socialize. I have to have the, but what's funny is that autistic people, our brains work differently. They found that most people, neurotypical people who are put around, more people around them, they actually get more oxytocin. Whereas autistic individuals, if you put them around too many people, their oxytocin levels go down. So
They
that's
just
the
get
weird
more
part.
anxiety.
Exactly. So you push these kids to go, hey, socialize, and then they're just like, I don't know what to do. I'm not happy, and they start crying. I'm like, it
Mhm.
it doesn't make sense. If your brains are fundamentally different, the way it works, you cannot force a child to be another way. It just doesn't make sense. Yeah, let's just throw them to the wolves. Why don't we do that? And
Yeah, I think a
I
lot of
get,
what's going on. It's no secret that a lot of people on the spectrum aren't very good understanding other people's body language, and all
mm,
the sort of social mores that people seem to know innately just from observation of some kind, right? It's not stuff that's spelled out very well, or
yeah,
even when it's explained to them, it's like, well, it doesn't seem very logical. I don't understand the context, right? And
right.
so when you get a social situation and you have a whole group of people that are sort of functioning as a group, understanding body language and social rules and stuff like that, and then you got somebody else who doesn't, of course, they're not going to fit in, right? If and they're going to be very self-aware of that, they're not having the same experience as everyone else, and sooner or later other people are going to tell them anyways. So it's rough.
I have I have to tell you, to go off of that, so the funny thing about the brain, if the brain is not ready, if the brain it hasn't developed enough to do a certain thing, it's not going to pick it up. So as an example, let's just say your mom made you go to ABA therapy or some therapy, occupational therapy, and expecting to improve the child. But the silly thing is, if you know the brain, that's like forcing a child to walk before they're ready. You cannot you cannot make someone more social. You cannot make someone pick up nuances because their brain is not ready. It has not developed enough to pick that up. But funny thing that you mentioned about as far as picking up social cues, I had to watch. I forced myself to watch for that. So I studied people. And that's the only reason why I got better at it, is because I forced myself to be very conscious of people's facial expressions. Not natural. It wasn't natural for me. I had to go, and now I'm actually better than most people at reading people because I forced myself to, when I talk to someone and or when they're around me, I look at their, I had to break it down physically of what little movements mean. So that's why if we play like poker or something like that, or the game Mafia, I'm freaking good at it.
Hmm. Yeah, I remember deliberately copying people because I was like, I remember
Mhm.
wondering, I was fortunate, especially like when I got to, I always had a few friends when I was going through school. There's always somebody that I got along with enough, but not in big groups. And then when I got to college, I had more friends that were, and it was how whatever reason it was easier around being around a group. Some of that was just there's easygoing people. They didn't really care how awkward I was, and then of course you start drinking, and then nobody cares, and whatever it was. But I started noticing, particularly in college, that some people are just natural leaders. It's like and it seemed to be
Mm.
easy for them, and they seemed to always know what they were doing. Like they always had goals and stuff like that. And I was like, well, how did you determine that's what you wanted to do, and how did you make a plan, and how is it that you can address the whole group so easily, and everybody's so amicable. And so I remember just like copying, just to see. It's like I didn't
Mm.
couldn't figure out how they knew how to do it, but it was working. So it's like, well, it works. So I'll just try copying that
Yeah,
person.
yeah.
Yeah.
I did the same thing. Yeah,
Yeah.
I do. How did it work out? Do you remember?
Well, it definitely made things easier, because
Mhm.
there's something about learning. It's like sometimes you realize I can't figure everything out, but somebody's already doing it and it works. However, maybe they didn't figure it out. Maybe they just it was an instinct they had. Maybe they learned it from somebody else. Maybe they copied somebody else. I don't know. Right. There's no identifying the origin per se, but there is seeing something working and then trying it and then having it work and then just doing it again,
Yep. And then maybe
So
even putting your own twist to it or something because you're different, right, from
sure.
that guy. Yeah.
Yeah.
No, I
You don't want
do recall
you
doing
don't
this. Oh, wait, go ahead.
you don't want to overtly look like you're copying somebody else. So
Yeah,
you got to put your own stamp on it, right?
that would be weird. I do recall really wanting to emulate somebody that I looked up to, the popular girl or whatever. It didn't work out, but like, you know, I think when you're, I think when you're around people who do emulate some sort of confidence, you do gravitate towards them, and you couldn't as a kid you don't know what exactly it is, like you were saying, you don't know what exactly if they just naturally have it or something. But to my understanding of the brain, if I of what I've studied, what I know of people, I believe it is learned. It's not something that is just some of it's innate, of course, whether you're introverted or extroverted, that's pretty innate. But like, I think what you portray and what you've learned is definitely through, especially parents or your family. That's what you learn.
Hmm.
That's where you everything pretty much socialization you learn from first is your family. So
Sure. You got to learn at
yeah.
least a big chunk from whatever your family unit is in the beginning, right?
hmm hmm I
Yeah.
was a weird kid though. I remember people telling me this all the time. You're such a weird kid. So, but that's okay. I got older. I owned it. I ended up, I, learning. I learned a lot through other people because I wanted to become an actress at some point in my adulthood. So I went to LA. Too bad we
Mm.
missed each other.
Right.
I I lived the LA life, and then me being able to like break down people's like body language and everything like that, like watching every nuance, really helped in acting. Let me tell you, I
Mm.
was able to copy people because of that. And I do it logically. I'll break it down and I go, why are they doing that? Why do they react that way? And then I can make a story behind it. And that's what you actually need for acting. You need to know what's the storyline, what's the story, why are these people, why are they are the way they are, what's their background. And so I think that just really helped. And being on an Atkins diet, like that just changed my brain to where I was able to understand eventually. Because when
Mm.
I remember as a child, I could not empathize with people. Why were they crying at weddings? I would think they're so weird. Like my mom is crying, my sister's crying. Why are you crying? It's supposed to be happy, right?
Yeah.
And then and then but for some reason my brain changed. Something changed to where I was able to understand because I could only empathize with cartoons for some reason as a kid. That's weird, right? And but as an adult, now I understand. Now I'm crying like every single like sappy movie. Like if they're crying,
Mm.
I cry.
Mm.
But yeah,
Good.
it's a very interesting childhood.
Yeah, and I think that's a mistake. There's this blanket sort of concept of autistic people don't have any empathy, but it's kind of they don't. It's more like they don't understand. Um, like you said, seeing people cry at a wedding, they aren't unfamiliar with the experience that those people are having, and it seems like yeah, they should be happy. Isn't this supposed to be the happiest day of their life? Why are you bawling?
You hit it on the money, though. That is so true. It is such BS to say, especially neurotypical people looking from the outside looking in, that autistic people do not have empathy or they don't they have no concept. That is such BS. We can empathize. We just sometimes don't understand every situation. Maybe even that moment we're just not feeling what you're feeling. So you know, or yeah, maybe we just don't understand what the concept of why you're crying. That really would help. If we did, we would totally cry with you.
Well, and of course, it's overblown too that people on the spectrum are not social or don't want to engage with other people. I mean, I certainly have some friends that are very hermit like, and they find like, people meeting people in person or crowds or whatever is completely overwhelming. Um, but we're still friends, you know, and I get that a lot, especially from from people like, well, you have friends, you're social, and it's like, yeah, and I see that it's different because a lot of the good times I had and friends I had was because they were the ones that were driving the outwardness. Yeah, I'd be perfectly happy to stay home, and they were it's like, no, you gotta come, you gotta come, you gotta come, and they were just fun people. I mean, that was probably the thing I was trying to copy the most was, wait,
Mm.
this person's fun. This person knows how to have fun. This person, you know, is just going out and coming up with ideas to do things that are fun or just, just some things you do just because it's a whole new experience, right? It's
Mhm.
exciting or whatever, you know. So that was the other thing too. It's like um copying other people's behaviors like that to see what would happen. So, and I
That's
think for me, a lot of it too is like at some point I stopped being as anxious about, doing things or being with other people because I realized there wasn't much point in caring, because the downside of doing something unpopular is really a lot smaller than living with the anxiety of worrying about it, you know?
Mm,
So it's like, yeah, I'm willing to be wrong. You know, I'm willing, I'm willing, I'm willing to look awkward for, whatever a day. And, you know, because you realize most of the time you're going to get it right, you
yep.
know, and there's occasional
Sometimes.
times when you don't, it's not that big a deal.
That's true. You totally make me think of my friend in LA. Like while I was there, like she was that girl. She was the one that wanted to go party all the time, or she was the one always inviting me out to go somewhere and try new experiences. I
Mm,
had that friend, and
hmm.
I learned so much from her. Yeah, I did emulate a lot of things from her because I wanted to take. You could see how popular she was. She was just like that. She wasn't like gorgeous or anything. She was just so, what's that word, like,
She brought a
attractive,
lot of
like,
energy.
yeah, she just was funny. She was open. She made you feel like you're important, just something. And I was like, oh, I really want to be like that. So I had to say, I took parts of that. What I liked, and I did, like, you practice it, tried it out. I saw results. So yeah, I think it does for us autistic people. If you can find that somebody and like that you really admire, if you can try to be around them more, if they like you around, like, that's the most important, if they like you around. Yeah, if you can just pick that up, practice it, because at some point you can use it, and it actually work for you, I feel like. And what that has to do with ATP, I'm not sure, but
Well,
it's
that
somewhere.
energy had to come from somewhere.
Yeah, anyway, I gotta get going. it's
Yeah, I
it's
should go
been
too.
so awesome.
But thanks for it
Geez,
was
we've been
great
talking
chatting
like
with
an hour
you.
and a half, right?
Yeah,
Yeah, it's been an hour
yeah,
and a
we're
half.
almost at an hour and a half. So, but great discussion. Thanks for coming. Thanks for everybody who was
Hi,
here for the
hi.
live stream, and thanks for everybody who watches afterward. Make sure to give us a like, leave us a comment, ask a question, give a suggestion, whatever it is. And we appreciate all the support, and we hope you got something out of the video. So
Yeah,
until next time, eat some meat,
so
feel
neat.
better.
Feel better.
Whatever you do,
What did you do?
don't fall
Don't
down
go down the car
the carpal.
pole.
Trying to end the broadcast. It's sticking.